Welcome to Warrior Money, the show devoted to supporting our brother and sister veterans in business. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze.
Our first guest today draws on his experience as a Special Forces Green Beret and as an entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of FRsix, a company that provides security and operation services. He also hosts the Jed Bird Podcast. Please welcome Fran Racioppi. Fran, welcome to Warrior Money.
Oh, thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And good to see both of you guys.
Yeah, man.
It's been a bit.
With you.
Thrilled you're here.
Hey, we do the first questions always bottom line up front, so bluff. We just had the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO. So executive security is a big thing. How do you project that moving forward?
I think executive protection has to be front and center of every leader's mind. I say leader for a specific reason because too many times when we look at security, especially in the corporate world, we either don't think about it, or we say, oh, that's the chief security officer's business, or if you have a chief security officer, or that's a leadership business at the CEO or executive level. Well, what I would tell you is that's everybody's business. There's this term that we have in the corporate security industry, and it's called duty of care. What duty of care means is that we have a responsibility for every single person in this organization. We have to protect their safety and we have to protect their security. And that is paramount both in the workplace and when they leave the workplace, especially when they're on official business for the company. You look at a situation like this with the United Healthcare CEO. He has a risk profile. Every single person in the company has a risk profile. I was the chief security officer at Snapchat. Look, we were on Venice Beach. You want to talk about a risk profile. You couldn't go outside sometimes without a homeless encampment being on the street, but you have to protect those people. Now, he has a risk profile when he's at home, and that's going to be at a certain level. When he comes into a city like New York City to a publicly advertised meeting, that's going to change, especially if you have threats. Now, I don't know what assessment their security team did, but what I know is that we've got to think about how does it change when we put our team in different situations. And that could be for the most junior person in an organization all the way up to the CEO.
Yeah. And especially when you look at, these are really all public-private partnerships, right? Because you have to coordinate with local law enforcement and let them know kind of what the plan is.
Our relationship with local law enforcement is absolutely critical. So we talk about public-private partnership. We actually just talked about this on the Jed Bird Podcast. So I had Dave Commandant, who was the chief security officer at the Boeing company for a long time. He came on and we said, look, security and national security, you expand out to national security, is most often done by the private sector. We have government organizations at all levels, local, state, federal levels, but they can only be as good as our private sector leaders within the security industry who go out and proactively make relationships with them. If you have operations in a major metropolitan city like New York, you got to go out and meet the NYPD. You got to be involved with what they're doing within their precinct. That covers different areas of the cities. We ran an office in Times Square. We were involved in the meetings that occurred for security and safety within Times Square because our people, in order to get to the office, had to go through Times Square. You got to know what's going on.
Yeah. Listen, I started my career as a security officer. I used to be an Eagles security guard in the old 700 level of Veterans Stadium. That was tougher duty than the invasion of Iraq when I was in the 2nd Airborne Division.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We talk a little bit about the interaction between private and public partnerships, and I don't think everybody understands that security isn't an inherently government service. Can you talk to me a little bit about FRsix, the business you formed, and how you're getting after the security problem as a private business?
Yeah. So FRsix, we run security and operations primarily for critical infrastructure, mass transit. We focus on state, local, and to an extent, federal government clients. The reason why I decided to do that when I got out of the Army, transition's hard. It's not an easy thing. The longer you're in the military, the longer that transition's going to be. The more ingrained you are, the harder it's going to be to get out of there. And then you got to sit one day, you leave, you turn your ID card in, you drive off the base, you look in the rearview mirror and you realize, what am I going to be when I grow up? Yeah. And everything you know is now in the rearview mirror. And that's a scary moment. And so I've gone through my whole evolution. I worked at Merrill Lynch and Bank of America. I was at Snapchat at an executive level. I ran a cannabis company for a Russian oligarch, which was wild. Story for another venue probably, and a different beverage in here. But then I said, okay, now's an opportunity to do my own thing. And I want to start a company that's going to create impact. I knew I wanted to hire veterans. I knew I wanted to give back to the community that I believe gave so much to me. But then it became, what do we do? Well, there's a lot of work out there in businesses that make the world go round. People have great ideas. They invent things all day long. I'm not an inventor. That's just not me. My business partner, he's a big brain guy. I look at it and I'm like, what makes the world turn? Services makes the world turn. So we went out and built a security company, man security. Then we said, great, man security is cool. What else can we do? Well, you got to have CCTV, access control, fire alarm, built a division in that. And then we got to get things to people, procurement activities, air conditioning units, filters, water, water fountains. All these things make the world go round. And so we found opportunities within the state and local government to provide these services. We went out and found big organizations who've been involved as prime contractors for decades, way bigger than us. And through the use of the service-disabled veteran-owned business set-aside model, especially here in New York State, we've been able to get involved in a lot of these projects at a small level, but we're a small company. Yeah. So a small part of a big contract is a big contract to us.
Talk to me a little bit more about what is the Service Disabled Veteran Award, and how does that help? How does that help? Like, what does that mean to a business? Because a lot of folks don't understand, and not only do they not understand, but they think they have to have that big, great, bold, audacious idea to even get started. We talk in one of our first episodes, like a very small percentage of veterans come out as entrepreneurs right now. One of the critical hurdles, I think, is like this mental block to like, we have to have a brilliant, amazing, great idea. When I think you're talking about more of like an incremental, like, let's get started with what we know and then build from there sort of approach.
Yeah, well, what I'll say is there's only one Mark Zuckerberg. Okay. There's only one Elon Musk.
Yeah.
There's only a handful of people in the world who sat down and had these series of ideas that changed the world and created all these things. But being an entrepreneur can be as simple as, hey, I like carpentry. I like painting. Okay. I want to be a plumber. All of these things are trades that you can learn, skills that you can learn. And it doesn't need to be this thing that we invent and go change the world. The service disabled veteran-owned business certification. You get it through the SBA at the federal level. And then the majority of states, almost every state, has their own level of that you apply for, you can go after. And so we're certified in Connecticut, we're certified in Massachusetts, we're certified in New York as well, and we're working on New Jersey. These states and the federal government have created what's called set-aside. So every contract that comes out, there's a certain percentage, and that could be anything from 3% to 10% to 100% of that contract has to go to a service-disabled veteran. The same exists for minority and women businesses. There's another designation called a disadvantaged business enterprise. We're applying for that right now too. If you get these designations, you get a seat at the table. It gets you in. It creates an opportunity where, as a small business, somebody who doesn't have 20, 30, 50 years and doing billion-dollar projects, it gives us an opportunity to get involved, get experience, make relationships, and then build that resume.
How do you think that might change moving forward? We're weeks away from the Trump administration coming in. How might that change at the federal level or even a state level?
I think that what we'll see is the enhancement of a business-friendly environment. I think that the investment always comes back to veterans. How do we want to create opportunities for veterans to be successful? One of the things that I don't believe is talked about enough right now is that we have an entire generation of veteran who's getting out of the military right now. That's the global war on terror generation. It's folks like me and my peers who, I was a junior on 9/11 in college. I finished college, and in 2003, I went in the Army. Well, that was now almost 22 years ago, 21 years ago. And I've gone to retirements now for guys that I served with. So what you're seeing is a massive outflux of service members, and those are the folks who fought the global war on terror. And we have to understand that all those people who went in, that massive call to service, everybody rallied around the flag, and Toby Keith and everybody else, they went in, well, they got to come out. Yeah. And where are they going to go, and what are they going to do? But what happens right now is the military is not in the news. We're not, and we're in some conflicts. We're talking about a little bit more because of the election. But by and large, President Trump, even President Biden, they wanted to tamp down the rhetoric around war. We want to go to war. We can all attest to that. Those of us who've been to combat understand we certainly don't want to go to combat. War is very different. And we definitely don't want to go to war like we saw in World War I and World War II, which if we face a nation state, we may find. But these folks who are getting out in massive numbers. Now we have to create opportunities for them. And I think that's going to continue in the next.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about leverage on Warrior Money, right? And so how will you be able to leverage what the VA offers? Because listen, every year there's 200,000 veterans or active troops that become veterans, and then military spouses as well. How are you able to leverage what the VA provided, whether it was through the GI Bill, whether it's through VOCAP?
Well, first of all, you got to educate yourself. Okay. I think that there's opportunities for the military community to do and I use that term specifically because oftentimes we put it on the service. We say, well, what did the Army do for you to get out? What did DOD do for you to get out? Well, to your point, there's 200,000 people getting out. There's only so much that the institution of the Army can do. And granted, in their defense, yes, we want to prepare folks to leave service just like we prepare them to come into service, but that their focus is on creating the warfighter for the next fight. Yeah. When you decide to get out, when it's your time, we all get out for different reasons, whatever it may be, you got to go, and their focus is still moving forward. The Army keeps rolling along. Yeah. It's the most important song that's ever been created. So there's other organizations out there, near and dear to my heart, Green Beret Foundation, but other organizations that are out there and all service components that can support and educate those who are getting out on what opportunities exist. The GI Bill, you're educated on it when you come in, you put money into it. You really, by and large, nobody knows what it is until you get out and think about, am I going to use it? You got to know what that is. You got to know what vocational rehab is, how it's different than the GI Bill. Organizations like the Yellow Ribbon Fund, which matches money that schools give to you in a grant. We want to identify what those are. And then you can start doing the math. Okay, I want to go to business school. I went to NYU. And then it was this combination. And the schools have great resources where they deal with this in the finance departments all day long. Okay, hey, I want to come here. You got to accept it. Awesome. How are we going to pay for it? Yeah. It's $180,000. Well, we got the GI Bill. They're going to cover a portion. The Yellow Ribbon's going to have a portion. School's going to cover a portion. Vocational rehab is going to cover a portion. And very quickly, you start to see the path of, wait, I can go get a top tier education, close that knowledge gap, because I studied broadcast journalism. I wanted to be here. I wanted to be a reporter. That was it. Tom Brokaw, Peter Jennings. That's who I wanted to be. And then, there were guys with beards and long hair riding horses through Afghanistan, and that all went out the window, and that's what I had to go do. But I never took a math class since high school. I think I had one core class in first semester, freshman year at Boston University. I didn't know anything about finance. Yeah. I didn't know anything about running a business. I didn't know what a P&L was, a balance sheet. So you got to go there and get those core skills. And those are skills that I use, that I learned through that process of going to business school, that I use every day as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Listen, we're going to go back to those skills and the Jed Bird Podcast, et cetera, when we come back. So listen, we're going to be right back more with Fran and FRsix. Welcome back to Warrior Money. We're joined by Fran here at FRsix. Fran, we just got done talking about your transition. You obviously in 2003, you were, or 2001, I'm sorry, you were a junior in college at Boston University. You go serve as a Green Beret. At that time I was a young Army captain at West Point teaching. Obviously you serve as a Green Beret, you go to combat, but that transition, utilizing the GI Bill, using the benefits with obviously voc rehab. What was that transition like though for you? And what advice would you give to young folks who are transitioning now?
You don't have to have all the answers. Okay, I've been out. It's crazy because I got out in 2016 and then realizing very quickly that was a long time ago. I mean, I feel like it was yesterday, but it happens very quickly. And I've gone through, as I talked about, a whole litany of different jobs and opportunities. Yeah. You don't have to have all the answers. The Army does a great job of really ingraining in you that this is your career. You're going to be here. And when we're young, when we're 18, 19, 20, we go in, we don't realize that's a long life. And we think, I'm going to be here for 20 years. That's like my whole life. No, you get out, you're 40 something years old, maybe even in your 30s. You got a whole nother multiple lives that you can live and go do these other things. So my advice is that find a good opportunity. Find something that you're going to learn from. It doesn't have to be your forever job. I think as veterans, because we gave so much to our organization, we put everything we had into it, that we think, well, when I go to the next one, I got to be there forever. I got to be there for the next 20 years. Do companies want you there for the next 20 years? They absolutely do. But what we want to do is find the opportunity that helps you grow. Find the opportunity that helps you to learn something you didn't know. Begin to take that next step forward and that first step into your next career and put something really great on the resume that you can leverage. I worked at Merrill Lynch. I was a terrible financial advisor. Okay, and I'll say on Yahoo Finance. I was awful, right? But because I didn't know anything about running it. Now, do I believe that I would have been successful had I stuck it out? I absolutely do. But I will tell you that the relationships that I made in that job, the guy I worked for who recruited me, Rick Nelson, Peter Cancro, the CEO of Jersey Mike's, became a close confidant of mine. And then years later, funded the Jed Bird Podcast for the first 2 years because I called him up and asked him how he was doing. These are critical relationships that I made, and I learned so much about the markets, how it affects business, and I use that every day.
Yeah. How about using that and you financing, obviously, your first company, doing that? Because Dan and I were venture partners, right? So we have other partners. We've invested about $75 million in 62 venture-owned companies. Mm-hmm. How did you use or leverage financing to get your companies up and running?
I don't know. I should ask you that question.
And what's the challenge on the access to capital? So there's multiple ways to think about that problem set. And one of the ways that we were talking about in the pre-show is like, hey, it's really hard no matter what you do right. So like you go from a big company, Merrill Lynch, where you never have to worry about payroll. Mm-hmm. You never have to worry about capitalization. It's kind of just built in to going to build your own company. And that's a hard problem that a lot of folks have to deal with. Talk to me about the mindset between shifting from big to smaller, creating your own thing, and the challenges that come with that.
Yeah, people ask me, was it hard being a Green Beret? And my answer is no, it's harder being an entrepreneur. You're rich and you're poor 4 times a day. Okay, and that's the life you live. Funding the business is inherently difficult unless you have money. Okay. You got to have money to make money. That's the reality of the situation. But if you don't have a tremendous amount of money to invest in the business, then you got to get creative in being able to do that. There's a couple of ways you can do it. Number one, you can go out and bring in partners. Partners are going to come in. You bring them in because they have access to opportunities and they have access to capital. You're going to give up equity. Most likely, you can give up equity. That may be the decision that gets made. We have not gone down that road in FRsix. We have decided to keep the majority of the company in our own hands, myself and my business partner. But the way we've had to do that is get super creative and going out there and finding strategic partners who will lend us cash for cash flow. Like I said, we're not building a product, we're running services. So I don't need an SBA loan for $1 million or $2 million to fund research and development, give me a prototype that I'm going to then go out and sell. I need credit lines because I've got to make payroll. I've got to buy things on terms. I may have to float cost, but in 30 days, 45 days, maybe 60 or 90 days, money's going to come in, we're cash flow positive, and I got to pay that down. So we've had to go out and find banks like M&T Bank, who's become a partner of ours. I worked at Bank of America, great organization, but you got to make money in order for them to take a risk on lending you money. As a small business, the more established you are, then they're going to open up the floodgates that Bank of America has and give you every opportunity, but you got to get there. The smaller regional banks, the local banks, they have a higher degree of risk that they're willing to take. Now, they're going to give you a lot less money, but sometimes a few $1,000s, $10,000, $20,000 when you're a small business can open up a lot more opportunity. And that's what it did for us. And then there's always credit cards, but you got to manage cash flow.
That's cash flow management cannot be understated as it relates to how difficult that is.
Hey, so listen, in the Army, it's, all 3 of us were Army officers. Shoot, move, and communicate, right? So communicate is critical. I know for us, being here where your money's on, Yahoo Finance, largest fiscal platform in the world, right? And so we're excited about it. But you launched the Jed Bird Podcast. I know you're a broadcast journalism, major at BU. Why'd you do that? I mean, we see it as a force multiplier for our brothers and sisters, but why did you create it? And what's the favorite part about it?
Nobody would hire me as an anchor. So what was I going to do?
Well, all 3 of us have faces for radio. That's a problem.
That's it.
Entrepreneurship.
I mean, it was that
I couldn't find the job, so I made it.
I made it. That's what you do. You solve complex problems. So everybody said, well, you didn't, I always said, look, when I get out of the Army, if I want to still go into journalism, the opportunity is going to be there. There's a lot of folks out there who do that. And when I finally came to the realization that I was still paying Boston University 20 years later, and I was about to make the final payment, I said, it's time to get a return on my investment in the journalism degree at BU. And I went out, I started talking to different organizations, media organizations, and saying, look, I want to be an anchor. And everyone said, that's great. Where's your tape from the last 20 years? And I said, well, here's my DD-214. It shows exactly what I did. And they said, well, you can't be an anchor. I said, well, you want to bet? I'll go out and I'll be my own anchor.
There you go.
And so I thought about, what are the stories that people want to hear? And what's my perspective? Well, my perspective comes out of special operations. What does it take to build effective teams and leaders who are willing to tackle any challenge, regardless of how difficult it is? And I said, I want to go tell those stories. And we've gone through an evolution over the last, it's pushing 4 years now when I first kind of concepted. And you were one of our early guests.
Yeah.
And we talked all about leadership, and we talked to a very few military leaders, and we talked to mostly entrepreneurs. And then we got into athletes, and we did a whole year with CrossFit and Go Ruck, and we went very deep into elite performance in the athletic competition. And now with our partnership with Green Beret Foundation over the last year, we've really gone to probably where we're going to be for a while, and as we should be. And we're talking about leadership at the national security level. We're talking about the military. We're talking about government, and we're talking about what makes America great as an institution, because America is not a place. America is an idea. That's why we got everybody in the world, by and large, wants to be in America, because of the opportunities we provide. And the opportunities are provided because of our men and women service members who are out there every day protecting freedom and creating that.
Yeah, well, we've got our last question here. You are a U.S. Army Green Beret. You're with the Green Beret Foundation. Talk to me about that experience as a Green Beret, and now why you've partnered with Green Beret Foundation. Just expand about that if you don't mind.
If I could be a Green Beret again, and I've actually changed the term, and I think we have to. Once a Green Beret, always a Green Beret. I think it's really important because you carry with it the character that you took into the organization. The Green Beret is something you wear on your head. The Special Forces tab that you wear on your shoulders, it's just a tab on a uniform, but it's about the person. The person is the Green Beret, and it's their character. And that character carries forward into business. It carries forward into everything that you do. It's the greatest job in the world. There's nothing else that creates so much impact as a team of Green Berets or a single Green Beret out there in the middle of Africa reporting back to the National Security Council what they see, and then senior executive leaders making a decision based on the integrity and the competence of that one person sitting in an embassy somewhere in the middle of nowhere. That's profound.
Yeah.
Green Beret Foundation, we're supporting Green Berets of all generations. That's really important because our service members, as they come out, we got to get them the support that they need. We got to get them through the VA process. We got to make sure that their disability process is going smoothly. And so we have resource officers in each one of the Special Forces groups. So our transitioning folks can go in, they link up with them, they tell them everything they need to know, and they run that process for them. They're the only soft charitable organization that's accredited by the VA to run that process directly at the foundation level.
That's awesome.
And that's critically important to getting those things processed. And then through our other programs, we have the Next Ridgeline program where we have classes now for transitioning SF operators to sit down and actually learn the skills they need to be successful. And we're creating a job board so that we can bring companies in who are looking for high quality talent and pair them up with our folks who are getting out.
Fran, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you, brother. Hey, listen, that's our show. So listen, subscribe, and review on Warrior Money on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you get your podcasts, or find us at Yahoo Finance. I'm Patrick Murphy.
And I'm Dan Kunze. We'll see you next week.